I do understand when they say this about Jokic. Jokic is probably statistically, when it comes to overall game, the worst MVP winner.
There have been a lot of criticisms of Jokic, aka the Joker. Some I agree with, some I can understand, some I just totally don't agree with. So let's get into it. The first reason I think people don't like Jokic, or they hate him, or his success, is his style of play. His style of play is very reminiscent of a Tim Duncan style, very fundamental. It lacks exciting plays, dunks, crossovers. After all, he's a 7-foot player, but a lot of people, being that he's not athletic, don't really feel him being a player that's appealing to watch. Tim Duncan, he played much more defense, so it's one of those things where they made an exception for him, but a big knock on Tim Duncan was that he was never athletic, and Jokic is the second coming. He's basically a big man who is the center of the team, central to the team's dominance, but he doesn't have an exciting style. He doesn't have a primetime style of play like a LeBron, Ant Edwards, even a Luka. Luka's not athletic, but with Jokic, he's not as exciting to watch. He doesn't dunk. He doesn't do really anything dynamic. He's really a dynamic thinker, so you have to be more into the IQ aspect of the game. He's more of a person who is just going to dominate without doing too much. Similar to a Larry Bird, he's a real technical player who's just going to dominate from a standpoint of not athleticism, but style and IQ. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons people hate him. Another knock on Jokic is when you become so popular, it becomes trendy to hate you. So you look at a LeBron, he made it to 10 straight finals at one point. And even though he's only won about 4 out of those 10, that's a monumental accomplishment. And most people's takeaway with that is that, well, he only won 4 out of 10. You'd have to go back to, I think, 1969 when you had a player go to that many finals. And that was Jerry West. He actually won a finals MVP, I believe, in 1969 against the Celtics. And he lost the Celtics matchup. So he lost the finals, but they gave him an award. And that'll never happen again, but that goes to show you these feats are very rare. That was like 50 plus years ago. And Jokic, he's experiencing the same thing. When you have a great player such as Jerry West, LeBron, people who become faces of the league, Jokic, they're making it hard for him to become face of the league because he's not so much marketable in his style, and he just plays basketball. And that becomes something people attack. People don't really like the whole modest star. And with Jokic, he's a pretty modest guy. It's easy to talk about him because he doesn't do much interviews. But most people, when they do their sports shows, they do speak of him because he's a back-to-back MVP. He's to this day, he's the champion. He'll be probably going back-to-back with the MVPs and the championships while getting his 3rd MVP season this year. So it's one of those things where when you become such a popular figure, it becomes easy to criticize you. And especially when you're not someone who responds, he's not concerned with American media. He just wants to play basketball, win, and go back to Serbia and ride horses, which is totally fine, but it becomes a trendy thing to hate you. Some people are just born haters, it seems like, but there's definitely LeBron haters, Kobe haters, Michael haters, because when you come so great, the cool and trendy thing to do is to be a contrarian and disagree. So I think that's one of the major things that people try to take away from Jokic. The third reason people don't like Joker or hate his style or whatever you want to call it is the fact he's so nonchalant. I think it's because he's from Serbia and he doesn't really connect with the American culture of being a celebrity and feeling like basically sports are the center of the world. That's an American type of mentality. Even though worldly entertainment does exist around sports, they have more to their cultures outside of America. Like European culture is different, and they tend to have more things to grasp upon for a culture. With Jokic, he win an MVP, win a championship. He may smile, he may drink a beer, but he's not going to be screaming, pouring champagne on himself. He's not going to remind you of the typical American star. Some people love it, some people hate it, but he's very nonchalant. He might be the most nonchalant MVP in history. I think Dirk Nowitzki was pretty nonchalant. Steve Nash, very nonchalant. Larry Bird, very nonchalant. Hakeem Olajuwon was a pretty nonchalant guy too. But in today's basketball world, he's the most nonchalant player, and it comes off as if he doesn't care, when in reality, he just doesn't center his life around basketball, even though he's really good at it. For somebody of that talent level, people would assume that basketball is their heart, soul, brain, bones, and everything. But in Jokic's world, it's just his vehicle to, better his life. And he treats it like a career. And he's excelling at his career. And the fact that he's so nonchalant when mostly everyone in the basketball world in America, they have an exaggerated view and exaggerated / amplified interest in the gossip part of basketball, the fallout, the negativity, the drama, the storylines, the things you see on like a show of Undisputed or Stephen A. Smith. They're moving away from it bit by bit with the advent of athletes having their own podcasts. But with Jokic, he's such a nonchalant person that people take it, and it's one of those things they can, add to the notches of not liking him, when that's not really a real thing. Being nonchalant, you shouldn't have to be arrogant to be embraced. But I guess being that the media doesn't pick him up and celebrate his personality, it is something that's absorbed as a negative trait, and people do criticize Jokic a lot for not really being enthusiastic. And number 4, the final reason. Now, him being on a Western Conference team doesn't help, as most of America, 85% of America, exists on the eastern side of North America. But him being in a small market like Denver doesn't help his case. But the major thing with the criticisms of Jokic is, unlike Tim Duncan, I mentioned it earlier, he doesn't play defense. So he's gotten better over the years, but when you have people averaging 3 blocks, 3.6 blocks like a Wembanyama or Bam in Miami Heat, you got a lot of people, as of now, like centers, Rudy Gobert averaging 3-4 blocks, that it makes him look like he doesn't play defense. In reality, he's just not the same type of player. He plays defense, but he's, spends most of his energy quarterbacking the offense, being the point guard of the Nuggets. Even though he's the center, he pretty much facilitates all the offense. And a knock on his game is that he doesn't play defense. You only had a few stars that played defense as much as they play offense, like Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, Kawhi Leonard, LeBron at one point in time. But there are very few players who play the same high-level basketball on offense as they do defense, and vice versa. You usually only have one aspect that you excel at. But with Jokic, if he ever does decide to better his, defensive stance or just better his defensive efficiency, he'll be great. But he's not a bad defender, just in comparison to a Hakeem, a Giannis, a Kareem, Shaq, all these historical guys that are 7 feet and excelled at basketball. He does pale in comparison in the defensive aspect. But it's truly not a knock, I would say, because he can just develop his game. And he's not, no knock on Carmelo, but Carmelo didn't play any defense at a certain point. LeBron, he kind of tapered off, but Nikola Jokic does play defense. It just, his style of defense is a more relaxed version, like a Luka. They don't play as much defense, but they're very prolific on the offensive end. And with Jokic, I think he'll always have that target on his back because he is that nonchalant guy that plays in a small market. He's from another country. He doesn't embrace the American celebrity culture. It's trendy to hate him. He reminds people a lot of Tim Duncan in his style, but he has more winning to do to be truly comparable, because Tim Duncan did accomplish a lot for his career, and Jokic is kind of midway through his career. He has a lot more years to go, but those are the main reasons I think people will always find a fault and always find enjoyment in criticizing Jokic. That's covered in sports. We got more videos on the way. Like and subscribe.